All right. I'm here with Coach Miller. Coach, first year in Hopkinton, we're going to recap, run through your entire career from when you started coaching all the way up till now when you came to Hopkinton. So, yeah. Let's start with soccer. You started off coaching soccer for 4 years over at Pelham, and you coached you helped out in middle school, and you were coaching in high school and stuff like that. So, yeah, how did that all start?
So I was, a four-year player at Pelham. And when I graduated, I kind of hung around the programs. I was involved with the town travel stuff, and then the varsity job opened up. And I was actually the varsity coach for 5 years before I left the first time. 7 years total. I was the varsity coach over there for soccer, and just kind of it was one of those. I was assisting with the middle school team. The varsity coach was leaving, and the AD asked me if I was interested, and next thing you know, there I was.
So it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Um, Not many people were in your situation. Usually, you look around the state, there's a lot of older coaches, and we don't see quite as many younger coaches. So for you to be in that role, you had to learn pretty quickly how to coach, and you know, probably a lot sooner than most people do at the general age when coaching starts. How is that a challenge, and how is that also an advantage later on?
The challenge is, having the resources and the experience of just being in those situations, those environments, coaching, high school age kids that, at the time I was 21, 22, coaching, 17, 18-year-olds, not a big gap. A lot of these kids I either knew growing up or I knew their older siblings growing up. So it was a little bit challenging in that regard, but at the same time, that was one of the biggest benefits was I was able to connect with them in a different way than most older coaches don't. So was able to pull a little bit more out of them effort wise and whatnot.
Do you have any mentors or any coaches that you learned from before you started coaching, or what, shortly after?
So like with basketball specifically, it would have been my middle school coach, my town travel coach. He's actually now the varsity coach over in Pelham. He was my first guy I was coaching with, Joe Morin. So I played for him for 2 years, and I coached with him for probably 5 or 6 as his assistant coach. I helped him out, and I still talk to him, weekly right now. And I see him all the time. We go golfing, we hang out, whatever it is, and stay pretty connected.
That's good. So let's go through. We'll talk about high school. You graduated from Pelham in 2009. You were kind of helping out with those programs. Then what came after high school? Fill us in on that.
So I started off in college and didn't really finish that out. But while I was in college, I didn't want to leave sports behind as it was. Right, I was that person that everything I did was soccer or basketball or whatever it was, kind of year round. So I got into coaching, even more so than I was in middle school, and became or when I was in high school rather coaching middle school. So it became kind of 5 days a week. You know, 2 seasons a year coaching middle school soccer, middle school basketball as the assistant coach, and just being as involved as I can to glean as much as I could off of other coaches and game situations.
So it sounds like that's what you knew you always wanted to do.
Yeah, it was one of those, the easiest way to stay involved in sports and have an impact and pass on the stuff that, I thought I had learned that deserved to be passed on.
So you learned all this stuff about sports. Was there any ever doubts that, maybe, yeah, I love sports, but I won't be able to make it work?
Um, Not really. As weird as I say, just it was kind of one of those, I never really pushed myself beyond where I thought I was ready to be. So I was never really in a situation where the doubts of whether or not I'm able to be successful, able to do my thing, those never really came into my
Okay.
head.
So just strong reflection and like realizing where you're at,
Yeah.
I think was helpful for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just kind of knowing my situations where I'm best right now, and I'll know when I'm ready to push myself forward and start looking for either higher programs or higher teams.
I think having that is something really good for coaches and probably players as well to have in terms of knowledge about themselves. So let's see. Let's go with soccer because you also didn't just coach with Pelham, but you also did like club soccer and stuff like that. You want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, so I've been coaching soccer, as a head coach in some capacity since I was 21. So we're talking 12, 13 years now of, head coaching with soccer. Currently coach with FC Stars for my club stuff, and I've been with them for, this is my 5th year now. Coaching all different ages, from high school kids all the way down to 7, 8-year-olds running camps and clinics and stuff. It's just one of those. It's a different environment completely, competitiveness wise, expectation wise, but it kind of keeps me engaged in that method of preparation, doing games and practices all the time year round.
So you've gotten the opportunity to coach players of very different ages.
Yeah.
Do you have like a preference for an age group to coach?
I like them all differently. Because with like the youngest groups I have, my 7, 8-year-olds, those teams are the ones where the kids come so eager to learn, eager to have fun, and you can really engage them in the sport in a way that it's about creating a love for it versus just teaching them the skills and drills and tactics of it.
Yeah.
With the older guys, you get the inverse of that, where they already love the game for the most part, and you can really get to the nitty gritty and really push them to test how much they really love it and grow it even more from there.
Yeah, because you can't really push them when they're just learning to love the game.
Yeah.
So as a coach, you care so much about sports and you want to bring more people into the game. So when you have that young age group, they could end up loving sports and they might not wanting to be a part of that. How do you do your part as like I don't know, somebody who's kind of representing the game to get them involved? Like what specifically helps you make them like the game?
Connecting them to the game beyond just being in practice with us, right? So it's letting them know that I want them to be there, and I enjoy having them there, and then creating an environment where they want to be there, right? So it's whether it's me showing up to their town team game because they're playing against some other kids on our team, and supporting them in that way, talking to them what they did on vacation, what's going on in school, all that stuff just helps them want to be a part of it, because when you genuinely care, it gets reflected back at you, and that connections happen because of that sport. Then it deepens the love for it a little bit more.
Do you feel like you have overall an extroverted personality? And if so, do you think that helps you as a coach?
I would say I'm fairly an extrovert. I'm not shy about talking to just about anybody about anything. And yeah, I absolutely think that's helped me as a coach with how I connect with my players and my willingness to be open and forward with them and not hold back and timid in any situation for the most part.
All right, let's go through both soccer and basketball. I'll start with soccer. Any experiences, any championship games, playing at cool locations, anything like that, special moments that you want to throw in there for coaching?
It's a long
I know.
list of years to go through. I'd say if I had to pick my number one, would have been my third year at Pelham High. I'm trying to remember what the year was, but it was my third year. We were at Prospect Mountain in the quarterfinals, I believe it was. At Prospect Mountain. So we were in D3 at the time. We were obviously the lower seed, at Prospect Mountain. They were the 2 seed. We were the 15, right, whatever it was. And it might have been higher than that. I can't remember. But anyway, so we were playing, quarterfinal game. We end up winning 2-1. Probably the best soccer I've ever seen a Pelham High team play at this point in my, my time there. And it was just one of those games where everything went right. Everything was perfect. It was just the goalies making diving saves that I've never seen him get to before. My AD is walking up to me going, does he have a horseshoe up his butt? Because if he does, make sure it doesn't leave for the next game. It was just incredible, and just seeing everything click with those guys and that performance from start to finish, just dominating against a reigning champ team that was a 2 seed and had, I think, 1 or 2 losses all year, was spectacular.
That's pretty cool. Right. What ended up happening with that team and your other teams?
So with that one, we lost to Guilford 2-1 the following game. Hate Guilford. No, we played a fantastic game, but it was my leading scorer, my top player, pulled his hamstring in the middle of the first half. We were up 1-0 at halftime, ended up losing 2-1. Again, boys played their hearts out, but just lost that scoring threat to keep us where we were and steady the ship. And that was one of the more heartbreaking losses I've seen, because we were in control for very much the beginning of the game for an injury to kind of knock us out of it. And then the rest of high school soccer was always building and growing and getting the program up to speed. And
Okay.
Yeah.
So something that we'll get more specifically into this Hopkinton team later on, but something that I've noticed your team really had a lot of strength with this season was depth. Was losing a player to an injury a good experience for you, and just how much depth means in sports?
Yeah, so it's one of those things where having every player know that today might not be their day, their role might not be one that shines today, but it doesn't change the importance of it. And when it is your time to shine, it is your time to step up. You need to be ready to kind of take the
Mhm.
reins, take control, and go. I think a lot of our guys this year specifically understood that and embraced it, where they knew I could play 15 minutes today, I could play two. When it's my time to get called, I got to be ready to go. And for the most part, I think they all stepped up throughout the season and filling those roles.
So we'll go into Pelham basketball now. Your favorite moments from Pelham basketball.
So I got two because they're back to back years. My first, it was my last year as the middle school girls assistant coach. Uh, we were down. We were playing Collie in the championship game, and I believe we were down 14 going into the fourth quarter. Down 11 with 4 minutes to go, came back and won. And it was the second greatest basketball performance I've seen,
Yeah.
especially at the middle school level, because the girls just clicked. We had bench players stepping up, making huge plays to carry us through and get us a win. And then the following year, my first year as the head coach, similar situation, down 14 with 4 minutes to go, call a timeout, kind of sell the girls because they're getting frustrated. They're all reaching that point of like, we're going to lose. The eighth graders, this is my last game. We're going to lose. Selling them down, getting them back into it, and then switch turned, and next thing you know, we end up winning by 7.
Wow.
And a 4.5 minute span, erase a 14-point deficit, and win by 7 was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. Never mind from, again, you're talking 12 and 13-year-old girls to just 12 to 13-year-old athletes, period, is incredible to be able to manage that and push through. That was, yeah, probably my favorite moments.
All right. You said you had two.
Well, those two kind of back to back.
Okay.
And then, as far as like, I guess if you want to go into like the high school stuff when I was coaching JV in Pelham, uh, I'd say there's no specific one, but there's kind of the whole season. My last season there, going undefeated with that group, and just dominating our postseason tournament, and start to finish, never really having a whole lot of games that were close, and knowing how well they prepared every single day and how ready they were and how hard they worked to then turn around and see 5 of my guys be varsity impact players the next year.
Okay. So anything else on Pelham?
Um, Nothing particular, it was just a great experience being there and, coaching in the hometown and coaching the kids I've coached and worked with as they all came
Yeah.
up through town, travel stuff, and getting to be with them for those runs.
There's definitely a lot of value in coaching in your hometown where you went to high school, graduated high school. Like I can see, how much that would mean to you. So what was it about Hopkinton that made you decide to come here and be a part of this program?
So the last 2 or 3 years, I've been kind of ready to take the jump to try to find myself a varsity job, and it hadn't really stuck. I was kind of hoping certain jobs would open up, and they didn't. And this past summer, I saw this one open up, and it's an hour ride, but it's a very competitive program every year. It's like they might not always win it, they might not always make deep runs, but they're always in the mix. They're always in the conversation. If I can get that one as my first year, as a first year varsity coach, that puts me in a very good spot to learn a lot, experience a lot very quickly. And I know it's a competitive environment, a competitive school athletically. If I can get that job, it'd be a great place to be, a great place to start, and to work out that way.
So in September, when you decided, that this is it, and you made that agreement, you announced it to everybody that you're going to be here. What was it like coming here for the first time, meeting the guys?
That was exciting. As we kind of said earlier, I'm not very introverted, I'm very shy. So I immediately introduced myself to the guys and kind of talked to them. And we were just running an open gym. So it was just playing fives, right? I had my shoes on. I ran fives with them, got up and down the court. Me and Liam got up and down the court, the entire time with them, doing our thing, and just kind of getting to know the guys in that respect versus as Coach Miller, it was more, this is just a guy running fives with us was awesome.
So that was like a good adjustment, was just
Yeah.
kind of getting to know them on a personal level
Yeah,
versus.
you're getting to know him on the court in the action versus, in the formal coaching setting where it can be a little bit different sometimes. It can kind of help break down some of those walls and that, unsureness, not knowing me and me not knowing them makes it easy to
Yeah.
learn names that way too.
I feel like that's like a style that I could definitely see a younger coach like yourself using, but not as likely an older coach would use that style, that probably worked to your advantage in the
Yeah,
end.
yeah,
So,
I'd agree with that.
so in the end, you start working through these open gyms and you're getting ready for the season, getting to know the guys. What's going through your head after you've gotten to know them for a few weeks or so, month, however long, and you're just like, okay, season's starting soon.
Yeah, I was excited. Uh, just everything I saw in the gym, the way the guys were getting after each other, the way they were competing, the way they were working, and again, not in a formal basketball setting. These were very much borderline pickup games. It was very unorganized hoops, right? It was what you expect to see on the street ball hoops, right? Uh, but I was very excited with the work ethic, the drive some of the guys had, the passion some of them had, and the skill level I was seeing all over the place had me very excited to get the season started and really kind of start pushing them in the right direction.
Okay. So you had all these guys, and then season starts, first game of the season. I don't remember who we played at. You probably
Mountain.
Fall Mountain. That's right. And we won that one by a lot. And same thing later on with Raymond, I think was the second game. And you start out 8-0. Really strong start. One of the last two teams in Division 3 to be undefeated. Just talk about that run for the first half of the regular season.
It helped that our schedule was on the softer side. I think in our first half, the only team we played that made the playoffs was Conant, I believe.
I think Monadnock.
Yeah, we did play Monadnock in
Yeah.
the front half. That's right, because we had rescheduled them.
Mhm.
So we played two teams out of our, 7, 8. Yeah, two out of the 8 games, 6 teams that we played, because we played 2 teams twice already in there. Were non-playoff teams, so they weren't particularly competitive. So it kind of built a inflated ego as to what we really
Yeah.
were while we were still figuring out what we are, and that created some of our problems down the line. But it was good to see a lot of stuff translate. See a lot of guys get a lot of minutes early for me to see what the other guys, not just the first 5 or 6, can do, and really kind of hammer down what my rotation is going to look like as we get into crunch time and games get a little bit tighter.
Okay, so two of the questions I had lined up for you. I'll start with the first one, fits in perfectly here, is when you're a coach, stuff goes well sometimes and stuff's not going well sometimes. So when stuff's going well and your team's doing good and you want to keep it up but not deal with thinking that you're really good when you could be overconfident and then you're vulnerable to lose a big game. How do you deal with that?
So I try to focus on the little things with them as much as possible. Right? It's not making big, fantastical changes to what we're doing or putting limitations on them. It's about being perfect in how we execute everything we do, being efficient. So, say we won a game, uh, say like 60-29. Right? I think that was a score out there somewhere in the first half of
Yeah.
the season. But it was, were we efficient today? Like, okay, great, we scored 60 points. We, went 3 for 12 from the free throw line. We had 16 turnovers, and our pace of play wasn't what we were looking for. Also, we allowed 29 points, and they were all on mismatch or missed matchups, missed rotations, whatever they were, where we weren't being as efficient, as effective within our game plan as we could be. So it was kind of preaching that aspect of it, and kind of driving that home, that we need to be clean in everything we do. No matter how we win a game, we need to do it cleanly and effectively all the time.
Okay, I think that leads in pretty well to my next question. So after the 8-0 start, you guys and Guilford were the last 2 undefeated teams, went up to Guilford, and hey, they have one heck of a program, 4 consecutive state championships. That's an elite team right there.
Yep.
But you ended up coming up short there, and there was, I mean, you still had a lot of time left in the season, but ultimately you wanted to win that one and you didn't. So how did you deal with that as a coach and get the guys focused and keep going?
Again, it was, obviously in the game, frustrations were high, right? So the halftime conversation was a little bit different than a lot of others. But the next day, back in practice, it was same thing. It was preaching efficiency, preaching effectiveness and execution. And we talked about transition. We talked about second chance points. They scored 79 points on us. 45 of those points came from those two categories. That's the difference in the game.
Yeah.
Right. Like that, you're never going to be perfect there, but that's the difference in the game right now, as far as the stats are telling me. And, they got it right. I think we bounced back. We turned around and played. Who do we play next? Do we play Monadnock again right after that? I think we played Monadnock.
You
right
played
after
Monadnock pretty quickly. Yeah.
But in a game where we were up pretty handily, Monadnock kind of hung around, but we were offensively efficient the entire way. They made a lot of really big plays to stay in that game with us. It wasn't so much us as it was them that kept them in that game. So it was very much just preaching again the efficiency and understanding the matchup and making sure we take advantage of what we're looking to take advantage of and take away what we know is their strength.
Okay. So you're working through the schedule, you're getting towards the end of the season. Towards the end of the season, it wasn't your regular season stretch wasn't as dominant towards the end of it as it was towards the start of it. So how'd you guys keep the confidence that, hey, yeah, we might not be winning these games again. It's tougher competition. You won some of them. There was some losses in there as well, but ultimately you guys wound up with the 4 seed. So what was that like, and working through the challenges and still trying to keep the confidence headed into the playoffs and keep the momentum?
I think the good thing with these guys is the confidence was never an issue, right? We had that 1 point loss or 2 point loss to Campbell, where we knew that we gave them a 15-point lead at one point during the first half. We were down 13 at halftime. We had the lead with 15 seconds to go. We played 15 and a half minutes of brilliant basketball, 16 and a half minutes of the opposite of brilliant, poor. And the guys recognized that, and they got a perfect example of what we are when we're at our best, what we are when we're not at our best, and that was kind of the highlight with everything else we did. Right, Mascoma, same thing. I think we lost them by 16. It was tied at the end of the third quarter. At the end of the third quarter, and Zach Thompson's a fantastic player. He took over and closed that game up. St. Thomas, we were winning for most of that game. We were down 3, had to start to extend a little bit, and they executed at the end. So it wasn't so much that we were losing games that we should win. It was we were playing against very good teams that executed the things they were supposed to execute when they needed to execute them. And we were in a spot where we were chasing against them and kind of forcing ourselves to have to make great plays when they only need to make good ones.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think confidence or momentum was a concern going into the playoffs, because we kind of knew what we were, where we were, and we could match up with anybody at any moment if we wanted to.
Yeah, and then we won in the first round. Remind me who we played in the first round?
Interlakes,
that's right. So that was a pretty good victory.
It's ugly. That was my worst scouting report of the year.
Okay.
I only had an hour of prep time for that one, because that was the White Mountains disqualification, followed by us getting the 4 seed, and then the tiebreakers all getting sorted out. And I didn't have Interlakes on my radar as a team we could play. So I was scouting for the other 3 teams that we could play. And then all of a sudden Interlakes is right in that bubble. And I got to figure out who they are now and find film on them. So it took us a little bit to figure out what we were doing.
I think this brings up a couple good points. One of which being, I think, through my eyes and through a lot of the fans' eyes, you won that game. It wasn't a big struggle towards the end. I mean, stuff could have been better, but through a fan's eyes, I think we did a good job there. Through a coach's eyes, you're always looking at what could we have done better.
Yeah. And again, it was just it was the scouting report. I didn't have enough time to watch 2-3 games on these guys. I had to pick one game where I knew they were playing against stuff that we like to do, so I could see what they do against it. And it didn't give a great picture. So there are guys coming in the games like, I don't know what hand they shoot with. I don't know if they can shoot. I don't know if they go inside. I don't know who this kid is. I don't have his name on my sheet, and he's coming in and hitting a shot. It's like I don't know.
So preparation is key, and I know you're always pretty good with that. And sometimes just in life, situation changes, and you can't always. It's not your fault, but you can't always have
kind of roll with
full time to adjust. Yeah, so it's a real point there. Then we'll get into the second round. and Campbell came here. We had Colton Martell here, and he was one of the best players in Division III. He played an excellent game. He's very difficult to defend. And that game was a nail biter towards the end. And you guys were trailing in the second half at one point and then came back, took the lead. And when you're down at that point, when you're at home in the playoffs, that's something that happened in the second round last year against Mascoma. But now this year, fortunately, we were able to win the game. So what was preached to the guys to be able to come out there and do that?
Player game. Right? We don't need to be anything other than a perfect version, or not even a perfect version, a better version of ourselves. Because the best version of ourselves can hang with any team. We put ourselves in this hole because we're providing an inferior product. Let's be better. Let's do better. Let's get ourselves there. And they all knew what that means. They all get that and buy into it. And when that happens, like I said, our offense is on another level with how great it looks and how well it moves. And they just, as good as Colton is, they couldn't score enough to stay on pace with us the entire way down.
So that was, I don't know. I had a lot of fun watching that game. I had a lot of fun broadcasting that game.
A lot of highlights in that game. There was a lot of very, very big plays from both teams in that. It was a good game to rewatch myself when I got home. that
was great. And then at the end of it, you punch your ticket to the Final Four, and first year head coach going to the Final Four. I was like, wow, that's mighty impressive. And I was like, okay, here we go. So Guilford, they posed a really big challenge for you guys. When you guys go up against them and you lose by a pretty heavy margin, it can be discouraging, I think, and intimidating to go back there in that game. But throughout the first half, first quarter into that game, it was 18-9. You were down by 9 points to Guilford, and you outscored them by 6 in the second quarter to be down 30-27 at halftime. It was like, we're in this, even though nobody expects us to be. And I was pretty impressed with that. So talk about when you're going up against the team, because every league has the team, maybe not as dominant as Guilford has been with their consecutive success in state championships and undefeated seasons and all that stuff. But the team, how do you go out there, and what's your advice to other coaches when you're going up against the number one team who everybody looks up to as that's the number one team?
We had, like I said, we had the mentality kind of all the way through that we're a team that nobody expects us to be here. So what do we have to lose? Let's sell out and try to execute as well as we can. And we started the game off great. I think we were up 7-2 before it was I think a 16-2 run to end the quarter, and then we turn around and next thing you know, we're right back in it to end the half, and we were within one, I think 3 minutes into the third quarter. Right. And we ended up down 8 or 9 and stayed there until 4 minutes left when we had to start pressing. It was very much a why not us? Why can't we? I think we have the pieces here. We have to be perfect to do it. I need everybody that's going to get on this court, and it's not going to be many of you, to be able to do it. And we glimpsed it without being able to touch it, but we were right there.
So you were right there knocking on the door to the finals. Coach, you got a long future ahead of you, I think. And I'm hopeful that you're going to stay here for a long time and continue to coach this program. And, it hasn't happened since, I think it's 1965, 1966 was the last time they won a state championship here. So it's proven that we've had so many great teams here throughout the years, and nobody has been able to get it done since the 60s. So what do you think? And at some point during your coaching career, I'd love to see it happen. And
I think every coach wants it to happen. It's a tall task. There's a lot of great coaches in this division. There's a lot of guys that I've always looked up to as a coach myself. Watching them coach and come in with a lot of reverence for what they do and how they do it. So it's certainly not an easy thing to do. And you could be the greatest coach in the world, but if you don't have the players right there to do your thing, it doesn't necessarily work. And vice versa. You could have all the best players in the world, but if the coach doesn't know how to use them, it might not necessarily be successful. So it's one of those, constantly working to put ourselves in the best spot, and hopefully we can bring home a title at some point. Yeah.
What's your plan to make the next upcoming years with you as the head coach different from what the results have been for the last 60 years?
It's about buy-in. The biggest thing I've heard coming in here was we have a lot of athletes playing basketball, not a lot of basketball players. I think the way the program is right now, I have a lot of guys that don't realize yet that they're basketball players playing basketball. They just need to recognize it and buy in. And there's a lot of younger guys coming up that I think are in the same boat. And if you can get them to consistently want to put the work in on their own and show up to the off season stuff and just stay engaged in the sport year round, it makes a big difference in our long term success. And I think I get a good group to start that with right now because I think they want to buy in and be a part of it and grow it to what it can be.
So with your style, I think that's something super important worth noting, not only how motivate the guys and talk to them, but also like just how you take the pieces you have and utilize them to their full potential, because from year to year those pieces are going to change, and you're going to have inevitably some guys graduate and you'll have some new guys who are available who you didn't have before. So how are you going to utilize them? Do you change your style year to year, or do you keep running the same thing overall?
To an extent, it's to say it changed my style is hard to say because my style is always going to be a little bit more about pace and movement and spacing and just being creative and fluid basketball players. But how we get to that product will change based on the pieces we have, right? If we're a team that has, a dominant big man, right? Like obviously Abram is a very good big man, right? And dominant's not the word you can always use. He has games where he is untouchable, and then other games where it's called on him to become more of a passer and a rebounder, and he recognizes that. If we have a season where we have a dominant big man and not a lot of shooters, the offense changes to find the ball into the hands of the guy that can score it the best consistently. If we're a team that's small but we could shoot, that changes how we do things a little bit defensively and offensively. But the general ideas stay the same. They just morph to the needs of the team and the players we have within it.
I think that's a really great explanation. Final point I want to get at here is advice to other coaches that coach who's, could potentially be a state championship coach in 10 years, but right now is not sure if he or she wants to end up coaching. What's your advice on that, and the way to coach players, the way to be a good coach? What makes a good coach in your eyes?
So for me, I've always modeled myself after the coaches I've kind of come up with, right? And it's, being connected to the guys, being connected to your players, not just as a coach of your sport, but as a person, right? The ultimate goal here is for these guys. I want these guys to still interact with me 5, 10 years down the road, not just, oh, we graduated, we hung around for a couple of years and came to games, and then you never heard from us again. Like, I want to be able to, still see these guys in 5, 10 years and have that relationship with them, because that's when you can really make something special happen, because everybody wants to put the work in at that point. So, connect beyond the sport and great things happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think having that strong connection, you want to work harder, and sometimes people, they just, you hit a point where you've been working so hard and it's tough to find that motivation to keep doing it for yourself. But if you have everybody around you who you care about and you want to do it for them, I think that's great extra motivation when push comes to shove.
Absolutely.
Any other advice in terms of when things aren't going well, when things are going well, and the unforeseen difficulties of coaching?
Just stay with it, right? Never too high, never too low, right? You can feel good about what you just did, but move on to the next. You can feel bad about what just happened, but, look at it, learn from it, move on, right? Don't let one thing, one day hang you up or lift you up too high or too far from, what you're trying to do, because that's the stuff that pushes you off task and takes you away.
All right, Coach, thanks for coming up. I appreciate it. Yeah. So keep working, keep going, and we'd love to see you take it home one of these years.
I'll try for you.
Yeah.